I almost choked when my dad told me the news that would ruin my whole life. We've decided to sell the house, he announced between sips of wine, as if commenting on the weather. Ashley's been accepted to Princeton and will need the equity to cover her tuition. The roast chicken turned to sawdust in my mouth. My sister, perfect Ashley, wouldn't meet my eyes, studying her plate with feigned interest. The music contract letter burned in my pocket, my one shot at a record deal, dependent on the home studio they were about to destroy. You're selling our home? I finally managed, the words scraping my throat. The house where I have my studio? Dad's expression hardened instantly. Alex, it's a fantastic opportunity for Ashley. Princeton doesn't just accept anyone. I slammed my fist on the table, glasses jumping, water splashing. And what about MY opportunity? The record label visiting next week? Mom gasped. Dad's face darkened dangerously. Lower your voice immediately. No. I stood so violently my chair crashed backward. 5 years building that studio, and you're throwing it away without even asking me? For her. Ashley's face crumpled as I pulled the contract letter from my pocket, waving it like a flag. Emerald City Records wants my demo. But I guess that doesn't matter since I'm just the other child. Mom reached for me, tears forming. Alex, please, when were you planning to tell me? I demanded, my voice razor sharp. Or was I supposed to come home to a for sale sign and a box of my things on the lawn? I see, I said, reaching into my pocket for the envelope I'd been saving for dessert. I've been so excited to share my news. What a joke. I tossed it onto the table. I was going to tell you that Emerald City Records wants to hear my demo. But I guess I'll need to call and cancel, since I won't have a studio anymore. The table fell silent. Ashley finally looked up, her eyes wide. Mom reached for the envelope, but I snatched it back. Alex, Dad started, his professor voice sliding into place. Be reasonable. This is about Ashley's future. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled. And what about my future? Has that ever mattered to you? Playing guitar in bars isn't a future, Dad snapped, the veneer cracking. It's a hobby. The familiar pain lanced through me, but this time, something else pushed through, rage, hot and clarifying. You've never even listened to my music. Not once. I grabbed my jacket and keys, ignoring Mom's pleas to sit back down, to be understanding, to not ruin Ashley's moment. Always Ashley's moment. As I stormed out, I caught my sister's expression, not surprise, but resignation. She'd known. She'd known all along. The Seattle rain matched my mood as I drove aimlessly through the city streets, windshield wipers beating a rhythm that seemed to taunt me with each swipe. 25 years old and about to be homeless. My so-called career hanging by a thread. And my family. God, my family couldn't even pretend to care. I ended up at Tone Records, my favorite vinyl shop, closed now with only security lights illuminating rows of albums. I parked anyway, letting the engine idle as my phone lit up with Mom's calls. After the fifth one, I silenced it and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Where could I even go? My bartending gig at the basement paid decent tips but nowhere near enough for Seattle rent. Most of my friends lived in cramped apartments with roommates. I'd been lucky, or so I thought, to stay at home while building my music career. Now that decision felt like a trap. A text notification slid onto my screen from Grandma Ruth. Call me, Alex. I heard what happened. News traveled fast in the Foster family. Grandma Ruth was Dad's mother, but they'd had a strained relationship for as long as I could remember. She'd been my refuge during childhood, the one who'd given me my first guitar when I turned 13, much to Dad's dismay. She lived in a small house across town, filled with books and records and the scent of cinnamon. I dialed her number, and she answered on the first ring. They're selling the house, I said without preamble, my voice cracking. I know, sweetheart, she replied, her voice warm like whiskey. Your mother called me to explain, hoping I'd talk some sense into you. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. Come over, Grandma said simply. I've got bourbon and leftover pie. 20 minutes later, I sat at her kitchen table while rain pattered against the windows. Grandma pushed a glass toward me and cut a generous slice of apple pie. Your father was always like this, she said, settling into her chair with a sigh. Even as a boy, he had to be the smartest, the most accomplished. Your grandfather and I tried to temper that, but... She shook her head. When Ashley came along, I saw it happening all over again. She was just like him. I took a gulp of bourbon, welcoming the burn. I don't hate Ashley. I know you don't. But she knew about this. I could tell by her face. Grandma nodded slowly. Your sister has always been caught between wanting your parents' approval and knowing what they're doing to you isn't right. Not an excuse, mind you. I stabbed at my pie. They've never thought music was worth anything. Dad practically had an aneurysm when I dropped out of community college. Robert is an academic snob who thinks anything without a PhD attached is beneath him, Grandma said with unexpected sharpness, including his mother who never finished college. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But that record label, is that real? I nodded, warmth spreading through my chest at her interest. No one in my immediate family had even asked for details. Yeah, Terry from the basement knows someone there. He passed along my SoundCloud link, and they actually listened. They want to hear more tracks. That's wonderful, Alex. Her eyes crinkled with genuine pride. Your grandfather would have been over the moon. He always said you had his musical ear. We fell silent for a moment, both remembering Grandpa Joe, who died when I was 17. He'd been my first audience, sitting patiently while I fumbled through chords. I don't know what to do now, I admitted. Without the studio, Grandma took a thoughtful sip of her bourbon. I might have an idea about that. But first, tell me something. How much of your heart is in that house? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Is it the house itself you're fighting for, or what's in it? I considered this. The house had been my shelter, yes, but also my prison in many ways. What mattered was the music, the equipment, the space to create. It's the studio, I said finally. It's the only thing that's truly mine there. Grandma nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Then perhaps it's time you claimed something that can't be taken away. 3 days passed before I returned home. I've been staying at Grandma's, sleeping in her spare room and avoiding my parents' calls. Ashley had texted once, a simple, I'm sorry, which I'd ignored. Sorry didn't fix anything. When I finally walked through the front door, the silence told me no one was home. I headed straight to my studio, taking inventory of everything I'd need to move. The mixing board, the monitors, the microphones, my guitars. I was wrapping cables when I heard the front door open and Ashley's voice call out, "Hello? Anyone home?" A moment later, she appeared in my doorway, Princeton sweatshirt already breaking in her wardrobe. We stared at each other for a long, tense moment. "So you're really going," she said finally, gesturing at the half-packed equipment. "Did you think I wouldn't?" I countered, winding an XLR cable tighter than necessary. Ashley leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. At 20, she was the spitting image of Mom, but with Dad's analytical eyes. I didn't want them to sell the house. I snorted. Could have fooled me. I'm serious, Alex. I told them I could get student loans. Yet here we are. I set down the cable and faced her fully. You knew before the dinner, didn't you? She had the grace to look ashamed. They told me a week ago. I wanted to warn you, but what? You were too busy shopping for Ivy League merch. Ashley flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair. The words erupted from me. Do you have any idea what it's like to be the disappointment? The one they tolerate but never celebrate? They're selling my home, my workspace for you, and you couldn't even give me a heads up. They're obsessed with me because they can control me. Ashley shot back, her voice rising to match mine. You think I want this pressure? To be their second chance at academic glory? They've had my life planned since kindergarten. I faltered, her words hitting a nerve I hadn't expected. What are you talking about? Ashley's laugh was hollow. Why do you think Dad pushed so hard for Princeton? His alma mater, his legacy. I wanted Berklee College of Music, but that was throwing my potential away. Sound familiar? The revelation stunned me. Ashley, perfect, obedient Ashley, had wanted music school? Why didn't you tell me? Because you were living your dream, even if it was hard. You were brave enough to fight them. I wasn't. Her eyes glistened. And now I'm the reason you're losing your studio. Your home. I sank onto my stool, suddenly drained. All these years, I'd cast Ashley as the villain in my story, the favorite child who grabbed all the spotlight. I'd never considered she might be trapped in her own way. Did you really get into Berklee? I asked quietly. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. Full scholarship. I didn't even tell Mom and Dad I applied. Jesus, Ash. I know. She took a tentative step into the room. For what it's worth, I heard your tracks on SoundCloud. You're really good, Alex. Like, seriously good. The compliment should have felt good, but all I felt was a profound sadness for both of us. It might not matter now. Without the studio. Ashley bit her lip. What if we both stood up to them? Together. I studied my sister's face, seeing determination replacing the usual careful compliance. Something shifted between us, an old rivalry giving way to potential alliance. I might have a plan, I said slowly, but I'd need your help. For the first time in years, a genuine smile spread across Ashley's face. I'm listening. The family meeting was Grandma Ruth's idea. She arrived with a file folder tucked under her arm and the kind of expression that brooked no argument, a look I'd seen whenever Dad tried to dismiss her opinions. Mom and Dad sat stiffly on the couch, clearly uncomfortable with this impromptu gathering. What's this about, Alex? Dad asked, checking his watch. Your mother and I have a faculty dinner in 2 hours. I stood by the fireplace, Ashley beside me in silent solidarity. It's about the house. Dad sighed. We've made our decision. The realtor is coming on Tuesday. Actually, Grandma Ruth interjected, taking a seat in the armchair across from them. There's something you should know first, Robert. She slid a document from her folder and passed it to Dad. Mom leaned in, reading over his shoulder, her brow furrowing. What is this? Dad asked, his face paling as he scanned the page. The original deed to this house, Grandma replied calmly. Purchased by Joseph and Ruth Foster in 1982. Left to Robert Foster in 1995 with a condition. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, triumph surged. Grandma had shown me the paperwork yesterday, revealing the bombshell that would change everything. This condition, she continued, pointing to a clause, states that the property cannot be sold without the agreement of all foster heirs until the youngest reaches 30 years of age. Dad's jaw clenched. Mother, that's preposterous. I've owned this house for decades. You've lived in it, she corrected. The trust owns it. And according to the terms, both of your children, your heirs, must consent to any sale before Ashley turns 30. Mom looked stricken. But Princeton, the deposit is due next month. Ashley stepped forward, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. I'm not going to Princeton. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's face cycled through shock, confusion, and the beginning of anger. What are you talking about? He demanded. I've accepted a place at Berklee College of Music, she announced. Full scholarship. I start in the fall. Dad shot to his feet. Absolutely not. We did not raise you to throw away your future on entertainment. Like your son. Grandma Ruth asked pointedly. Dad turned to her, face flushed. Mother, stay out of this. I've stayed out of it for too long, she replied. I watched you crush Alex's dreams for years. I won't let you do the same to Ashley. I moved to stand beside Grandma, feeling stronger with her at my side. We're not trying to hurt you, I told my parents. But this stops now. The favoritism, the control, the dismissal of anything that doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. Mom's eyes welled with tears. We only wanted what was best for both of you. No, Ashley said, her voice gentle but firm. You wanted what you thought was best. You never asked what we wanted. Dad sank back onto the couch, the fight seeming to drain from him as the reality of the situation settled in. The house can't be sold, he murmured, more to himself than to us. Not without our consent, I confirmed. And Princeton? Mom asked weakly. Was never my dream, Ashley finished. Music is in our blood, Mom. Grandpa Joe's legacy didn't disappear just because you and Dad chose different paths. Grandma Ruth smiled at the mention of her late husband. Joe always said the Foster musical talent would show up again. He'd be proud of both of you. I looked at my parents, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Not villains, just flawed people who had lost their way trying to shape their children into reflections of themselves. I'm keeping my studio, I said firmly. And I'm sending my demo to Emerald City Records. And I'm going to Berklee, Ashley added. We're not asking permission. We're telling you what's happening. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dad stared at the deed in his hands, looking suddenly older. And the house? He asked. I exchanged glances with Ashley before answering. We stay. All of us, if you want. But things have to change. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the Crocodile, one of Seattle's most iconic venues, gripping my guitar as the crowd's energy pulsed through the floor. My first official showcase for Emerald City Records. The demo had landed me a development deal, not a full contract yet, but a foot in the door that even Dad had grudgingly admitted was impressive. 5 minutes, Alex, the stage manager called. I nodded, taking a deep breath. In the green room behind me, voices mingled, Grandma Ruth's distinctive laugh, Ashley's excited chatter as she showed off what she'd learned in her first semester at Berklee. And more surprisingly, Mom's voice, asking questions about sound engineering that sounded genuinely interested. Dad hadn't come. Some changes take more time than others. But the house remained ours. My studio had expanded into the garage with proper soundproofing. A project Mom had unexpectedly taken an interest in, researching materials and helping with installation. Ashley and I had converted the basement into a shared practice space for her visits home. Ready? Ashley appeared at my side, peering through the curtain at the gathering crowd. Terrified, I admitted. She bumped my shoulder with hers. You've got this. And if you don't, I'll just claim I'm not related to you. I laughed, the tension easing. Thanks for flying back for this. Wouldn't miss it. She hesitated. I talked to Dad yesterday. I stiffened slightly. And he asked for a recording of tonight's show. She smiled hesitantly. He may not be here, but I think he wants to listen. I nodded, throat suddenly tight. It wasn't approval, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall. The house lights dimmed, and the stage manager signaled me. You're up, Foster. Knock, am dead, Grandma Ruth called, appearing with Mom beside her. My grandmother's eyes shone with pride. Mom stepped forward awkwardly, then surprised me with a quick hug. We're proud of you, she whispered, the words sounding unpracticed but sincere. As I walked onto the stage, the spotlight blinding and the crowd a faceless mass of expectation, I realized something profound. I no longer needed their approval. I had found my voice, not just in music, but in life. The house that had almost divided us had become just a building. The real home was the truth. We'd finally started speaking to each other. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the blur of faces. I'm Alex Foster, I said, my voice steady and clear. And this first song is called Foreign Children. I struck the first chord, and the past fell away. This moment, this was mine, and nothing could take it from me. The record deal came 3 months later. A small indie label, but with distribution and a budget for a proper studio album. I signed the papers in my home studio, the space that had once been my refuge, now a symbol of victory. Dad stood in the doorway as I set down the pen, his posture stiff but his eyes softer than I'd seen in years. Congratulations, he said formally, as if we were still navigating the new terrain between us. Thanks, I replied, equally careful. He stepped into the room, looking around at the equipment with new interest. The recording Ashley had sent him of my showcase had become a weekly ritual. Him listening behind his closed office door, emerging with technical questions that revealed he'd paid attention to every note. Your grandfather was a talented guitarist, he said, running his fingers along the edge of my mixing board. I never had the ear for it. I blinked in surprise. Dad rarely mentioned Grandpa Joe. Grandma says I play like him. Dad nodded, a small smile touching his lips. You do. I recognized it in your third song at the showcase. It reminded me of him playing in the living room when I was a boy. The revelation hung between us, that Dad had listened carefully enough to make the connection, that he carried memories of his father's music despite his decades of dismissing mine. I didn't understand, he continued, avoiding my eyes. Music was his passion, not mine. Books, ideas, those made sense to me. When you started showing his talent, He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. I was wrong to dismiss it. From my father, these simple words were seismic. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement, the closest we might ever get. There's a faculty reception next weekend, he said, changing the subject. For new department chairs. He hesitated. They've asked me to arrange some background music. I thought perhaps. The offer hung in the air, tentative and incomplete. I could put together a playlist, I suggested. Dad shook his head. I was thinking live music might be better. If you're available. The invitation stunned me into momentary silence. To play at his university, in front of his colleagues, this wasn't just acceptance but public recognition. I'd need to bring my equipment, I said, testing the waters. Maybe Ashley could join remotely if we set up a live feed. Something like eagerness flickered across his face. Your mother already suggested that. She's quite taken with the idea of a Foster family musical showcase. I laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I never thought I'd hear those words from you. Neither did I, he admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability. But perhaps it's time I started listening to different ideas. He gestured to the contract on the table. You've proven me wrong, Alex. That takes considerable talent. It wasn't everything. The years of dismissal and favoritism had left scars that would take time to heal. But as Dad awkwardly extended his hand, I took it, feeling the first genuine connection between us in years. One condition, I said, still holding his hand. No more foreign children in this family. No favorites. Dad held my gaze, understanding the reference to my song, the story of siblings made to feel like strangers in their own home. Agreed, he said simply. Outside the studio window, Seattle's perpetual rain had finally stopped, weak sunlight breaking through the clouds. In the kitchen, I could hear Grandma Ruth teaching Mom one of her recipes, their laughter floating down the hallway. Ashley had texted this morning about her upcoming visit, excited to share new techniques she'd learned. The house stood, no longer a battleground but a foundation, not just of walls and wood, but of newfound understanding and respect. Hard-won, imperfect, but ours. I released Dad's hand and picked up my guitar. "Want to hear one of the new tracks?" I asked. Dad pulled up a chair and, for the first time in my memory, sat down to listen.